If you can't think clearly while sitting still, if you need to pace, fidget, bounce your leg, or move your body to process thoughts effectively, you're not hyperactive, undisciplined, or unable to focus. Neuroscience reveals you're a kinesthetic processor, and your brain thinks better when your body is in motion. Movement isn't a distraction from thinking, it's how your brain thinks best. Let's talk about something that gets you in trouble constantly. You can't sit still while thinking. When you're trying to solve a problem, process information, or have a deep conversation, your body needs to move. You pace back and forth while on phone calls. You fidget with objects during meetings. You bounce your leg, tap your fingers, rock in your chair, or walk around your room. Teachers told you to sit still and focus. Bosses give you looks when you stand up during conference calls. People assume you're not paying attention, that you're distracted, hyperactive, or rude. But the truth is the opposite. You're paying complete attention precisely because you're moving. Here's what psychology and neuroscience reveal. You're a kinesthetic processor. Your brain has a strong connection between physical movement and cognitive function. For you, movement isn't a distraction from thinking, it's a necessary component of thinking. Studies show that kinesthetic processors think more clearly, process information more effectively, and solve problems better when they're allowed to move. Forcing you to sit still doesn't improve your focus, it destroys it. Research from cognitive science shows that people vary in how they process information. Some people are primarily visual processors. They think in images and benefit from seeing information. Some are auditory processors. They think in words and sounds. But kinesthetic processors integrate physical movement with cognitive processing. Brain imaging studies show that when kinesthetic processors are allowed to move while thinking, they show increased activation in both motor regions and cognitive regions simultaneously. Your brain literally works better when your body is moving. This isn't hyperactivity or inability to focus, it's your brain's optimal processing mode. Here's what's happening neurologically. Movement activates the cerebellum and motor cortex, but it also stimulates the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for executive function, problem solving, and complex thinking. Research shows that physical movement increases blood flow to the brain, releases neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine that enhance focus, and creates rhythmic neural patterns that support cognitive processing. When you pace while thinking, you're not distracting your brain from the problem. You're creating the neurological conditions that allow your brain to solve the problem effectively. Let's talk about the specific types of movement that help you think. First, pacing. Walking back and forth creates rhythm and bilateral stimulation that supports problem solving. Studies show people solve complex problems better while walking than while sitting. Second, fidgeting. Manipulating objects with your hands occupies the motor system just enough to prevent restlessness without distracting from cognitive work. Third, leg bouncing or rocking. Repetitive rhythmic movements create neural patterns that support sustained attention. Fourth, standing or moving between positions. Changing physical state helps shift mental state. Fifth, gesturing while talking. Hand movements aren't just expressing thoughts, they're helping generate thoughts. Here's the ADHD connection. Research shows that people with ADHD have even stronger needs for movement during cognitive tasks. Studies show that children with ADHD perform better on cognitive tests when allowed to move than when forced to sit still. The movement isn't hyperactivity interfering with focus. It's necessary stimulation that enables focus. If you have ADHD and need to move while thinking, these aren't separate issues. They're connected features of how your brain regulates attention and arousal. Research on fidgeting specifically reveals important findings. For years, fidgeting was seen as distraction and sign of poor focus, but studies now show that fidgeting can improve concentration, especially for people who are under-aroused. Fidgeting provides just enough physical stimulation to keep the brain at optimal arousal for focused work. Research shows that students who fidget during lectures often retain information better than students who sit completely still. Your fidgeting isn't preventing learning, it's enabling it. Let's address the developmental piece. If you've always been someone who needs to move, this pattern probably showed up in childhood. You were the kid who couldn't sit still in class, who got in trouble for getting out of your seat, who was constantly fidgeting or moving. Teachers might have interpreted this as behavioral problem or lack of discipline, but research shows that movement needs are often temperamental. Some children are naturally higher in movement requirements for optimal functioning. You weren't being difficult, you were trying to meet your brain's processing needs. Here's the classroom and workplace problem. Traditional educational and work environments are designed for people who think best while sitting still. You're expected to sit at a desk for hours, remain in one position during meetings, and demonstrate focus through stillness. But research shows this design disadvantages kinesthetic processors. Studies show that many people, especially those with ADHD, high energy, or kinesthetic processing styles, perform better with movement-friendly environments, standing desks, walking meetings, freedom to pace, fidget tools available. Research on phone pacing is particularly interesting. Studies show that a huge percentage of people pace while on phone calls, especially during important or emotionally engaging conversations. Why? Because without visual input from the person you're talking to, your brain seeks other sensory engagement. Movement provides that engagement and helps you process the conversation. Your phone pacing isn't nervous habit, it's cognitive support strategy. Let's talk about the creativity connection. Research consistently shows that physical movement enhances creative thinking. Studies show that people generate more creative solutions while walking than while sitting. The movement isn't just accompanying the creativity, it's facilitating it. When you pace while brainstorming or problem solving, you're using movement to unlock creative cognitive processes. Here's the memory and learning advantage. Research shows that movement during learning improves memory encoding and retention. Students who take walking study breaks, pace while memorizing, or incorporate physical movement into learning retain information better than students who study seated and still. Your need to move while processing information isn't interfering with learning, it's enhancing memory formation. Research on bilateral stimulation, movement that alternates between left and right sides of the body like walking or leg bouncing, shows that this type of movement may facilitate integration of information between brain hemispheres. Studies in trauma therapy use bilateral stimulation to support processing. When you pace or rock while thinking through complex problems, you might be facilitating interhemispheric communication that supports problem solving.